Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 67th series of the Urban Workshop that is co-organized by Centre de Sciences Humaines and CPR. For today's seminar, we're delighted to have Mr. Kulwant Singh, the Asia head of UN Habitat. He's going to speak to us on a very pertinent issue of smart cities and approaches to the development of these smart cities. We welcome you, Mr. Singh. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to this very distinguished gathering, to which I have also been participating occasionally because it provides a very interesting platform to discuss some of the issues that concern us on a day-to-day basis. I have a presentation which I like to make. Some of the presentation is divided actually in I would say 2 or 3 parts. Most of it, initial part with which you will be familiar, I'll be just flipping the slides, but I just want to remind you of some of the background, some of the issues that really affect us on a day-to-day basis. There are some, I would say that from a UN Habitat perspective, some radical thoughts for us to really think about so that, we are able to really understand if we shall be able to fulfill this dream of 100 smart cities, So to that extent, I feel that it will be important that, but I am just going to make some of the plain statements for you to really consider on that. I'm not sure how does it, I think it's opening, yeah. Yeah, okay, fine, thank you. I'm quite sure that you are familiar with the UN Habitat as a UN agency. Today it is known as a UN agency for the cities and towns, established in 1976 with the first Habitat 1 conference which was held in Vancouver, and our headquarters are in Nairobi, and we work on largely on 2 issues: housing per se, which is both rural and urban, and all issues that pertain to urban areas, towns and cities. I'll give a little more background with a slide, but let me just, I think, take it over from there. My opening slide does mention that we are moving towards inclusive, safe, resilient and sustainable urban settlements. This is the Sustainable Development Goal 11, which is likely to be, I would say, endorsed and approved by the General Assembly next month. And I think the world has to really work towards this goal: inclusive, safe, resilient and sustainable urban settlements. So therefore, the touchstone for the smart cities are also going to be some of these features that we are trying to set out in the urban goal, Sustainable Development Goal 11. These are few of the things which I like to share with you. I am sure most of it is very well known, but still, if you actually see this slide, it's very interesting that in the year 1800, 215 years ago, this planet only had a population of 1 billion, just 1 billion, right? And the second billion got added in 130 years. In 1930, we were 2 billion. In the year 2013, we were 7 billion. Between 1930 to 2015, in an 85-year period, we added 5 billion on this earth. The second very interesting aspect is that in the year 1800, the urban population was only 2% of the 1 billion. In the year 2013, when we had 7 billion people, the urban population was 54%. And we are likely to add another 3 billion by about 2050 or 2055. And largely the growth is urban. And I think that's a real good challenge. Urbanization is growing really fast, more than the population growth itself. And that's a kind of slide which I'm just sharing that. These are all UN statistics which are there. Worldwide, urban populations are growing 20 times faster. 57% of world's population will be in urban areas by 2025. These are slightly 5-year-old figures, but the revised estimates indicate that this 57% may become 58 or 59%, as we are already 54%, in 2013, 2014. It's also very interesting. Keep these factors in mind. Basically, we are going to discuss the smartness of our cities and towns, and therefore this is very important to see some of these features. Some of the regions like Asia and Africa, we are not so much urban, but we are still growing fast. By 2030, we will be 54-55% urban in Africa and Asia. But very interestingly, a region like Latin America and the Caribbean, they are already 76% urban, even more than the developed regions. It's interesting. And they are likely to be 85% urban by the time actually we are in 2030, the last year of the Sustainable Development Goals. One thing basically I like to make this statement that you see, urbanization is not the result of only the development process. Urbanization is development by itself, because urbanization creates economies of agglomeration and urban value generation. And that's what basically is the role of urbanization. So it's not something that you can stop it, it's happening. It's not because of the development, but we say in UN Habitat, urbanization itself is development, and therefore we have to really manage it appropriately. Cities do become more important as urbanization intensifies, and this is basically based on some of the data that the City 100, they are expected to account for 35% of the global growth. And if we take 2000 plus metropolitan areas in the world as a whole, they are expected to contribute 75% of the global growth until 2025. That's the kind of role which cities, as a matter of fact, do play. We all know, we have been arguing, debating cities as engines of economic growth, and it's mainly because there are agglomeration economies, there are urbanization economies, and as a result, as a matter of fact, wealth gets generated in the cities. And if, for example, the growth perspectives are to be seen, we have to really see how our cities are really managed. There are three things which are really impacting current trends, and different urban impacts are there. There are impact of climate change. There is also a differential impact of growing and aging. There is an impact of urbanization on economies also in variety of ways. Very briefly, if I may say, dividing the world in two parts, the developed world and the developing world. If you see the developing world, we find that there is a highest impact due to climate change in vulnerable and poor cities. You are experiencing floods, you are experiencing droughts, you are experiencing famines, they are happening. There is a demographic shift we are experiencing also in India in a very big way. Growing youth population, potential economic asset, no doubt it is, but there is a challenging unemployment of urban youth. We have been experiencing good growth in India last 10 years, but it has been a jobless growth. And therefore, as a matter of fact, there is a big challenge at this moment for the current government how to really engage, involve, create livelihood opportunities in our cities and all that. High rates of urbanization with low level industrialization, as a matter of fact, creates more problems. And of course, the endemic urban poverty manifested in slum formation, resort to informal low value economy, etc., etc. Developed world has its own challenges because they are having the problem of aging population, and then there is a growing cost of old age services. There are also growing inequalities. There are therefore different kind of challenges which we are really facing today in the world as a whole. Developed world has different challenges and the developing world very particularly different challenges. But both are experiencing, and then in our developing world, this is the challenge of slums. Nearly, as per our statistics, UN statistics, 1 billion people are living in slums. Sub-Saharan Africa, at maximum 62% of the urban population is living in slums and squatter settlements. We also have cities. One of our, I would say that, most important city, the city of Mumbai, 50 to 52% population is living in slums and squatter settlements. It's a very interesting thing to say, how do we make those cities as smart cities? There are challenges that we have to really keep those in mind. 60% population of the city of Mumbai lives on 6% of land. That is the kind of challenge we have. South Asia, no doubt, actually we have 43% of the population living in, I would say that, slums and squatter settlements. There are studies which have really shown that our slum population over the years have gone down, but there are also counter studies also which are there. But the challenge does remain in any case. Let me just share with you few facts, well known to you, but still I would say 2011 census indicated 377 million urban population, which is likely to be 600 million by 2030 as per the present growth scenario. We will be adding 223 million population in our urban areas. But interestingly enough, you will find that although we say that as per 2011 census, there are almost like 8,000 towns and cities, the statutory towns still remain 4,041 and not beyond. Part of it is unrecognized urban areas. Again, that's a kind of different kind of issue, and that's a different kind of challenge that we really have. By another 15 years or so, there will be 10 states of India which will be more than 50% urbanized by 2030. I'm just slipping these because these are the facts. I want you to keep them in mind when we discuss the whole issue of smart cities. By 2030, there will be 13 Indian cities which will have a population of more than 4 million. It's again going to be quite a challenge managing mega cities. There are different issues, different problems and all that. Cities in India will account for nearly 70% of India's GDP by 2030. So, I think if you see the large tier and large tier 1 and 2 cities, they require heavy investments, per capita investment exceeding $200 per annum, per capita, per person. So, larger the city, larger that. This slide actually requires your personal attention, I would call it this way. This is of course based on some of the works by McKinsey, no doubt about it, but similar results are available by a report by Ishirja Jalwalia earlier on the subject of infrastructure. Results are more or less similar in both cases, but I just quoted these figures. Present scenario indicates that water supply quantity per capita is only 105 liters per capita per day available today as on date, while it should normally be, as per the norms, 150 liters. Best scenario is 220. When you talk of programs like smart cities, we are talking of 24/7 water supply, 24/7 electric supply, and many things like that. How are we going to attain and achieve that? There is the issue of share of public transportation. Presently, it is only 30% public transport available. Vehicular congestion, 170. I want to remind you, we all live in the city of Delhi or NCR Delhi. Last year, we added 500,000 vehicles in the city of Delhi. 5 lakh autos, vehicles in the city of Delhi. And one vehicle takes 10 square meter area for parking. But you need not one parking, you need more than one parking. You need one parking at home, one parking at your workplace, one parking at your temple, one parking in the market, elsewhere, like that. Think of what we are really doing. And this is the result leading to vehicular congestion. Sewage treated, only 30%. Only class 1 cities have got treatment facilities. Class 2, class 3, 4, 5, 6, none of them have got, either they don't have sewerage or they have no sewerage treatment facilities. Parks and open spaces, we should need 9 square meter per capita. We only have 2.7 square meters per capita. And if you take slum population, current statistics available indicate 24% population living in slums and squatter settlements, while it should normally be 0. These are the things. And if the current trajectory continues like that, it will result in urban decay and gridlock. Because you can expect in future the water supply becoming 65 liters, vehicular congestion increases from 170 to 610, and slum population increasing to 38%, business as usual by 2030. That's a kind of scenario. In that sense, if I may say so, the current initiatives by the Government of India, whether with respect to, you may say, the smart cities program, whether it is Amrut, whether it is housing for all by next 7 years, by 2022, or whether it is Swachh Bharat mission, or other programs put together, we have to really evaluate them, and if they get implemented, perhaps I think the scenario will really change. But urbanization per se does offer massive opportunities also. Let me also remind you very particularly, because what's imagined is that with the urbanization you are also generating more and more wealth, and the likelihood is that since we had only 10 million population as middle class population, middle class families, middle class households in 2000, they will be like 148 million by 2030. And as a result, very naturally, it will certainly have impact on the economy of the urban areas. This was also part of the study by McKinsey only, but just to remind you that this will impact, the share of wallet, how it will shift from basic necessities to discretionary items. Very essentially, it's very interesting, that the, consumption in terms of food beverages will come down while utilities are going to really increase in a very big way. Of course, I'll not like to focus mainly on these few slides, but they indicate that there are going to be 12 clusters which will provide access to the urban market in a very big way, and how this opportunity really helps India to grow faster. But at the same time, these are the 5 urban operating model have 5 key elements which are significantly important, which indicate how we really need to address, the urbanization model of India. First is the financing part of it, the funding part of it. Where will the resources come from? That is the point. Where will resources come from? Second is the governance part. Third is the form basically, where population will get distributed. Will the people go on coming only to the bigger and bigger cities and smaller cities get neglected? Then of course the issue of sector policies and planning. I particularly would like to mention to you, financing part is one aspect of it. While we need more resources, but do we also have a capacity to spend those resources? I would like to mention about JNNURM, when, as a matter of fact, the whole scheme announced in December 2005, the Prime Minister said $12.5 billion are available for this purpose. At the end of the program, 7 years after, only 7 billion could be spent for want of capacities on the part of the cities. The money was available but could not be spent simply because there was no capacity that was available to spend the money. But if you actually see the requirements parts of it, it's very interesting. This data is really, similar to what what the Indian study also said. The capital expenditure we require, basically $17 per capita per annum. We require $134 per capita per annum, but while it is available only $17. We require during the next 15 years 1.2 trillion US dollars. 1.2 trillion US dollars. While the money available, as you know, it was with difficulty that $12.5 billion were indicated in JNNURM that could not be spent. Only $7 billion could be spent. So it's also a question of the capacity issue in a very big way. We also need to leverage some of the new sources to satisfy urban funding requirements. One of them is monetizing land, and I want to dwell on this for a minute. You see, normally cities always feel that they do not have resources, they depend on higher levels of government, from central government or state governments, but are they using land as a resource? You think of if the agricultural land is converted to the use of urban land, how this value of that land goes up manifold. If that is so, if that increase in land value can be captured, you can finance your urban development in a very big way by monetizing that land, by converting the land use. It's like printing money, which local governments do not have power to do that, but by converting the land use change and enhancing the value, you can certainly do it in a very big way. There are other options which are available. You have the public-private partnerships or government support and things like that, but you need a lot of resources and requirements. Coming to the issue of smart cities, let me just say, friends, there is no single definition which is there. There is no single definition which is acceptable anywhere in any part of the world by any country, any organization. But there are all kinds of things which are said about smart cities. The 21st century smart cities, they say, need smart business, smart living, smart education, smart citizens, smart community, smart governance. Think of smart government. Our own minister Naidu Sahab normally says you need also smart government and smart people, both. So you need smart infrastructure, but smart utilities, smart mobility, smart environment, everything smart. But how do you make it? That's the real good issue. There are a lot of things. It's not all about technology. It's much more about other things. This is a diagram which I picked up from one of the organizations who have been saying that an intelligent city has to be necessarily a digital city. So you need smart energy, you need smart building, you need smart mobility. Everything has to be so very intelligent. I do know there are some of the cities which actually have come up during the last 10-15 years. One among them is a city in Korea where they say it's an eco-city. It's a most intelligent city in the city of Incheon, Songdo. But there are also a couple of cities which have come up in China and other places. But it's not all about use of IT. It's much more than that we are really talking about. There are smart sectors. We are talking of now smart, water. You are talking of smart integration, smart energy, smart public services. All that is fine. There are, in the world, there are 10 smart cities on this planet. I just listed them from one of the organizations saying that. But India dreams of 100 smart cities in the next 15 years. That's the real good point. Some of you who were present during the launch of the Smart Cities program, perhaps you must have seen this, I would say a few slides which I am going to repeat and show you. But those who did not, perhaps I think can really take, this is the Government of India's, in a way, definition. How do they define it? They say a smart city has basic infrastructure. It uses smart solutions to make infrastructure and services better. And it also relies on area-based development. Three things. Basic infrastructure uses smart solutions to make infrastructure and services better. That means they should be efficient, they should be cost-effective, they should, be available to everyone, inclusive. If I take the objectives of a smart city in India, these are the 5 objectives basically which they have listed out. Provide basic infrastructure. Second, improve quality of life. Focus on clean and sustainable environment. Apply smart solutions. And then setting up examples so that the other cities can replicate them within and outside the smart city and catalyze the creation of similar smart cities. This is the strategy which Government of India has laid out. Pan-city initiative in which at least one smart solution is applied citywide. Only one smart solution. You may have clean energy, or you may have smart energy, or you may have smart water. It may not be everything smart, but one smart. And develop areas step by step. And there are 3 models that have been suggested for area-based developments, which means existing areas, making them smart. I do not know if you know the opposite of smartness. What is it? Stupid? Are our cities stupid at this moment? Is something that we have to really think of. Retrofitting, redevelopment, and then greenfield. Greenfield is basically new areas development, Like for example, you take up another big open space area for development and do that. What is the kind of basic infrastructure? Please think of whether we shall be able to have it. Assured water and electricity supply. The city of Bangalore supplies water intermittently, not on all days, only on alternate days. But we are talking of assured water and electricity supply 24/7. Sanitation and solid waste management. At this moment, 50 to 60% solid waste management is collected, remaining is not collected. Municipal wastewater, as a matter of fact, is not treated. Efficient urban mobility and public transport, I am sure we all experience it. And how do we really make it? Affordable housing. This is another challenge. Affordable housing for everyone. I will at some stage during my presentation talk on the housing issue very particularly, because we in UN Habitat have got very particular views on the subject, because we feel that housing is a subject where pro-poor housing should not be outside the city. It should not be located at a place where perhaps I think the land is very cheap, but the person has to travel miles and miles to come for the workplace. So therefore we have separate views on the subject, and we shall be talking a little bit on that. These are the other features which they have mentioned: robust IT connectivity, e-governance and citizen participation, safety and security of citizens, health and education and economic activities, and livelihood opportunities. What's most important is livelihood opportunities for our youth, very particularly. It's very important. And this basically public infrastructure has to be built not with the little money which is being earmarked for this purpose, 100 crores per city per year basically, but with other programs also, with let us say Amrut, or for that matter money that will be available for housing for all, or the other money which will be available for Swachh Bharat mission and others, with all other programs to be synergized. Smart solutions, application of ITC. I'll not dwell on this, but I think what they are saying is smart solutions application to municipal services and infrastructure to make them better. Some illustrations have been given. Area-based development models, they have talked of retrofitting for part of the cities 500 acres so as to achieve the objective of smart cities mission to make it more efficient and livable. Redevelopment of smaller areas. Example was presented during the launch of one area, what is called Bendi Bazaar in the city of Mumbai, but a very small area of 27-28 acres land basically. Greenfield developments, they are talking about new areas within the same city, new areas, but basically having very innovative planning, financing, etc., etc. But kindly see the kind of, it's very interesting to see that the area-based development, now we are arguing for planned mixed land use. Planned mixed land use. This is one thing where we in UN Habitat are also arguing for mixed land use planning. But at the same time, this is in contravention with our current practices of what we have, the master plans. When we prepare a master plan for a city, we divide the city into different zones. This is an industrial zone, this is a housing zone, this is a recreational zone, and things like that. If we are really focusing on the planned mixed land use, we have to really change that entire practice of mixed land use, the zoning as such. Housing, especially for the poor, is another area which they are highlighting. But are we able to provide house for everybody within the same city? Walkable localities, most desired features. There is no doubt about it that if we are able to achieve that, preservation and development of open space. I did highlight in the earlier slide where I said that only 2.7 square meter area is available per capita, while it should be 9 square meter per capita that should be available normally. Public open spaces is a very important area, very close to the heart of UN Habitat. I'll be talking a little more on that subject, but let me particularly say that it's a very important feature. Public transport and the last mile connectivity. Governance is citizen friendly and cost effective, so that people should be able to have their grievances cleared very quickly without any problem, and they should be able to reach the government without a problem. City-wide smart solutions can be variety of them, but I'll show you another interesting slide which they presented it during that period. There can be various kinds of smart solutions, but you can add more smart solutions if you have. They're relating to the waste management or water management or energy management. There's no doubt about it. Smart urban mobility and things like that. They have highlighted some of these as examples. But let me come down to the real theme that I wanted to touch upon. I have talked only as a backgrounder what the government of India is trying to do, how we are trying to really build our Indian smart cities, what's the kind of strategy, what are the kind of challenges that we have in the Indian cities particularly. UN Habitat, as I said, as a UN agency which has got several programs, we work in some of these programs which are really, I have just listed them out. All issues pertaining to, urban areas, and we work with all the 193 countries because all the 193 countries are member states of the UN Habitat. Our 21st century smart city model that we are really going to talk about, I just want to mention to you that we view the urbanization model, the current international urbanization model, very differently. The current international urbanization model basically is based on a kind of modern movement, the principles of which are: one, zoning of the land use, and we are totally, I would say that, against the zoning of the land use. Second is a tower in the park. Basically, most of the houses now coming up multi-storied, no doubt about it, but there is no open space available. It was called tower in the park, but now it has become tower in the parking zone because a lot of cars basically are there. There's no space for parking. You have super blocks, you have mass housing schemes. Most of the urbanization that's taking place where infrastructure as a guide for planning, motorways, railways, channels, suburbanization of housing, and what we find as examples of accelerated urbanization is in Japan, in Korea, rapid reconstruction of Europe, growth in the United States. Those become kind of models for many of us. But significantly, if you see, and this is as much true in India, is the emergence of the real estate industry. Modern financial instruments for housing and city development, booms and cracks, and that's a problem. Professor Kundu in his report mentioned that there are 18.75 million housing shortage in urban areas in 2012. In the same report, he mentions there are 11 million housing lying vacant. It's a contrast, and it's mainly because there is a real estate developers and most of the things are in their hands. And urbanization, I live in the city of Gurgaon. 70% of the roads do not belong to the city, they belong to the developers. You can't do anything about it. It's a very sad state of affair. We have seen in 80s, globalization of the economy, free capital movements. We have also seen the Chinese development, which has been driven by manufacturing compared to our Indian model, which is very different. There is a continued acceleration of urbanization, but at the same time, we also find emergence of urban poverty in a big way and gated communities. Before entering this room, we were discussing about gated communities also. Some are very happy about the gated communities. We also find in the same period increased migrations with new forms of ghettos which are developing. There is a kind of metropolitization. There is a land use specialization. And as a matter of fact, this is mainly because there is a weakening of urban planning and design. The moment you say urban planner, he prepares a master plan and he does nothing but zoning. Master plan, urban planning is synonymous with zoning. But that is something where perhaps I think we in UN Habitat are totally against it. We feel that city as an aggregation of functions and artifacts, and then we also feel that there are conflicts of legislatures. We feel within India also the same situation. Local level governments, despite 74th Amendment, are not empowered to do anything. And you do have no doubt wards or districts or counties, but as a matter of fact, even the city of Delhi, multiplicity of organizations and lot of challenges. I'm just touching one or two slides only regarding the developed world, but what is it that they are really facing post-industrial city and post-manufacturing city? Just touching upon that, they are currently having low rate of urban population growth. There is an increased aging of the population, which I mentioned. There is increased immigration. Regeneration of public spaces is quite a challenge there. Recovery of the downtown and proliferation of the gated communities. There is also inequity which is emerging in a very big way there. There are areas, countries where perhaps I think they are facing deindustrialization also. And as a result of the deindustrialization, which is the shrinking of the manufacturing sector, the employment is dominated by the services sector. There is a high consumption of fossil-based energy, resulting in high contribution to climate change. And there is obviously, as a result of all that, an increased environmental footprint. If I take the developing world where we all live, these are the features that we find, very specially. There is a lack of urban planning and design. Even if you take of the 4,041 cities in India, not more than 2,000 cities have got a master plan till today. The other 2,000 do not have any kind of planning. There is a high growth of urban population. There is a youth bulge that we are feeling. Informal urbanization which is taking place. I did mention about several census towns. It's nothing but informal urbanization. There is a lack of public space. There is a high level of informal economy. There is the whole issue of lack of capacity in our cities to generate new jobs, which we have experienced during the last 10 years. Jobless growth. And then there is a privatization of urban development. This is certainly happening, privatization of urban development, and it has its implications. what else do we find? And it's very much true in the Indian situation. Weak legal normative framework, rules and regulations, very poor. Lack of a financial strategy to sustain the urbanization process. Do we have our plans which are financially sound? There are no significant economies of agglomeration, no significant economies of urbanization, and what's really happening is infrastructure dominated urban growth. You can go on making flyovers without providing the connectivity with the city. There is a very high congestion. There is unaffordability of urban plots. How many of us can really buy a plot and then construct a place? We are therefore in UN Habitat arguing for a kind of new urban agenda for the 21st century. I am not necessarily using the word an agenda for making every city a smart city, but basically we are arguing for some of the features that really need to be separately for the developed world and separately for the developing world. So far as developed world is concerned, there is a need for revitalization of the urban fabric, well-designed compactness, it's very important. Affordability of the city is very important. Is city affordable for everyone? That's a very big question. Then we need integrated regional planning, mixed land uses, and infrastructures adapt to the needs of the people and the plan. What we are arguing even in the developed world is there is a need for policies to make city affordable. They also have to address the issue of climate change appropriately and identify new urban sources of prosperity and well-being. But let's come to our world. What is our world? Do we have a national urban policy in India? We do not have it. We have a housing and habitat policy, but we do not have a national urban policy per se. We actually do not have any planned city extensions and city infills. You know, city of Delhi is growing, basically that, but when the city of Delhi grows, the number of slums or the slum inhabitants also grow. But are we planning something? When the city also grows, you have to really plan the city extensions appropriately. There are a couple of slides that will talk a little on length on that, but let me just say there is a need for that. For the smartness of a city, UN Habitat argues for a three-legged approach. What is that? First, in that part of that three-legged approach is urban planning. Urban planning and design in a manner that you have, I would say, that open spaces, you have right kind of connectivity in the city and all that. Second and most important is normative issue of rules and regulations. You must have sound rules and regulations for the city to be administered and managed. And third is a robust financial planning. If any of the three legs falls, the city cannot really function properly. So a kind of three-legged approach we are arguing significantly. In some of my following slides, I think you will see the impact of that. Urban affordability policies also are very, very important. You make the city for everyone, and therefore the city must be affordable for everyone. There is a need for a design to obtain economies of agglomeration and economies of urbanization, because the inherent justification for urbanization is mainly that urbanization does help in generating wealth, works as an engine of economic growth. But it can work only as an engine of economic growth if you do provide and facilitate economies of agglomeration and economies of urbanization. Otherwise, it will not. Urbanization to eradicate poverty and promote development. We therefore need to go back to our basics so far as the urban design is concerned. The essence of urban design is the proper design of public spaces and the provision of well-structured buildable plots. We normally argue that the city should have a buildable area and open space area. Open space basically is space for the streets and space for the gardens put together. One of the best examples which is quoted is that of Manhattan, 1811, when there were no cars, when there was no electricity. The city was planned in a manner that almost 50% of the area was left for builders, building, etc., and 49% area was left for open spaces, roads, streets, and gardens. Till today, New York remains the same so far as streets are concerned, so far as avenues are concerned. They remain the same. Nothing has changed. Buildable area has become more intense, no doubt about it, much more compact, but open areas do remain the same. And that's the argument we say we have to really look at the whole issue of urban planning. One of the best examples given in India is normally that of the city of Chandigarh. But even the city of Chandigarh, the area left for streets is only very limited, 18%, and not more. Why are we arguing for urban planning and design? Because we want that the present urban sprawl should become more compact. Only then you will have urban economies of agglomeration and urbanization. From segregation, that means from zoning, we are arguing for integration. We are arguing from congestion to connectivity. When we talk of building smart cities, these are the features so far as urban planning and design is concerned. This is a picture of, I would say that New York, 1882 to 1883, that's the period. But plan was prepared in 1811. And let me remind you, when the plan was prepared, it was only drawings, and those drawings were the law. Those drawings were the law. There was no text in that. There were 3 surveyors and 3 planners who did it, and that became the law, and that law still is implemented. We have seen Singapore 1965 and Singapore today, Shenzhen, China, and earlier and today, and these transformations have been possible only because of the robust planning at the heart of urban transformations. And that's what we really need to look at and do it. Urban planning is the first pillar of the 3-legged approach which UN Habitat is arguing for smart cities. Second is the urban legislation. Land regulation. Land is a key issue. Largest number of cases in different courts are relating to land. Regulation and protection of public space is very important. We are not able to do it. Regulation of buildability and urban development rights, plotting regulation and building codes. These are the kind of things which urban legislation do cover, and essentially they must be as stringent as possible. third is the financial part, urban economy and municipal finances. It's very important, but as you know, the financial health of many of our cities and towns, so far as their municipal finances are concerned, is not very healthy. Therefore, basically, we have to really address that issue. Land value sharing system. I did give a small hint on this, that monetization of land, and that land values, when they increase, that benefit should be really taken equally by the local governments. Without that, perhaps I think the benefit goes to the private sector, the builders and others, and the local bodies, local governments do remain poor. There is the indispensable role of local governments. There is no doubt about it. But in our Indian situation and scenario, the local governments do remain extremely weak, no doubt about it. And there is no talk on the subject so far as the smart cities or Amrut or other programs are concerned. Good urbanization, we believe, can only come out of proper dialogue between national and local governments. While local governments carry a great deal of responsibility, we all know they have got limited powers. They can do little without support and resources from their national governments. It is true, but they equally need a certain degree of empowerment so that they can act and deliver. There is a larger role of the national governments, and I actually would like to argue out that national government must have a national urban policy. They establish the legal and financial frameworks as well as large infrastructures and the broad national policies in security, social welfare and regional policies, and they do have a larger role. I don't have to say much on this. Basically, I have just explained that an effective and relevant national urban policy is very much necessary as good urban planning and design at local level. I am particularly like to again stress on this because the need to move, we are arguing also. In fact, we are in touch with both the ministries, Housing and Urban Poverty Alleviation as well as with the Ministry of Urban Development. Now, until and unless both have same minister, common minister, but at the same time there is a challenge, those two ministries don't talk with each other. There is a need to move from a housing policy to an urban policy. Housing policy should be part of the urban policy, national urban policy, because you have to have housing which is affordable and cannot be tackled in isolation from the urbanization process. Both are so linked in a manner that housing policy should be part and parcel of the national urban policy, which is missing today. I'll also again highlight this point that you need planned city extensions if you want to avoid slums and squatter settlements. Good and sustainable urban planning has to ensure adequate compactness, mixed use of land, social integration, and a proper sense of human scale. Very particularly the two aspects, walkability and quality of public space. The roads should be for 8-year-old and 80 years old. You have to really ensure that degree of walkability. And the quality of public space, we do not give that importance, but we really need to consider how the city gardens and city open spaces are so important. Today, we are using malls as our streets, but we do not have streets where we can walk and do the shopping. We do not have that, and that's where we really need to bring in changes. A few slides before I really close, and I want to remind you we are in the 21st century. The 20th century urban development model has really not delivered. It is not sustainable. What we have found in the 20th century model, because it was a 20th century experienced dependency for our mobility on cars in a very big way. What we have found is slums and housing backlog, which is there. We are experiencing in India, but I am talking of the developing world as a, as a whole. Urban infrastructure and services, there is a huge lot of backlog, and the urban sprawl is increasing. The dependency on car has gone up in a very big way. Before the Second World War, cars in this world were being manufactured in hundreds or thousands. After the Second World War, which is a benchmark which I take, after the Second World War, cars were being manufactured in millions. And car dependency has increased in a very big way. Our urban planning has got high level of zoning. There is a segregation and exclusion. Societies, it's a poor people's area, it's a rich people's area. There's a complete loss of street life. There's a high energy demand and emission of greenhouse gases, and we are clamoring now for climate change issues. There is an increasing number of urban disasters that are taking place. I give you examples of our own country, 3 examples. I did mention about the city of Mumbai with 60% population living in 6% of area, 50% of the population living in slums and squatter settlements. But think of your own city where we are, city of Delhi. Last 1 or 2 years, if you see these kind of studies that have really shown, I think the air quality of this city has gone down so much. Many of them say not a livable city. And think of our spiritual town, Varanasi, has the most polluted river, to which we really, as a matter of fact, what should I say, the river Ganges, most polluted at the point where the city, and we are now going to spend millions or billions of dollars to clean it. And this is the result also of the kind of urbanization that has taken place in the country. Do you think this is the kind of model that you will really like it? This picture can be for any, I would say that for any city in India or any city in China or any city elsewhere. This is another picture which I deliberately try to indicate. Do you like this kind of area which is completely secluded, isolated for residential? No life. There's no life. Do you really like these kind of areas to be developed like that? Or would you not be happy with a mixed land use where there is vibrance? That is why, I again repeat this slide, we are arguing for compactness, we are arguing for integration in our smart cities, we are arguing for best connectivity in the city where an 8-year-old and 80 years old can walk on the streets. You have space for the cyclists, you have space for the non-motorized transport, you have space for the public transport, and car is used only as a holiday thing. So my dear friend, these are some 8 features which I have listed out. 21st century smart urban model. First feature, most important, is high quality of public space. I have highlighted some of these aspects, but this is one of the most important feature, high quality of public space. I was just mentioning before I entered this room that, as you know, UN celebrates World Habitat Day every year, first Monday of October. And first Monday of October, which is 5th October in 2015, the world is going to discuss on public spaces. This is the theme. This is the theme for this year on the World Habitat Day. The relevance of open public spaces, quality of public spaces, debate. Basically, as I mentioned, as an example of a city like New York, we have 50% of the area for streets and parks and 50% as a buildable area. The reason is that a street will remain for million years, but buildable space will change after 70, 80, 90 years. There are houses at some stage, there will be offices at some other time. So buildable area will change, but streets will never change because a lot of investment goes on those streets, underground infrastructure that gets created and things like that. So therefore, as a matter of fact, there is a need for having enough space for that purpose. Proper and well-designed densities, it's very important. And the argument that we normally give is that if you want agglomeration economies, you need densities. Without that, it will not happen. Mixed urban uses. We are arguing for avoiding zoning. Not that you can totally avoid it. You can keep 10, 15, 20% of area for specialized uses, no doubt about it. But generally, avoid zoning and avoid highways dividing neighborhoods. 40% of floor space allocated to economic uses, which we normally do not. And therefore, the so-called residential areas become commercial areas. Single-use blocks cover less than 10% of neighborhood. I think this is the kind of message that we are trying to give. Another important feature of a smart city should be mixed social structures, social integration, diversity of social groups. I would like to mention that in our feeling, in our mental psyche, we normally say, well, it's a poor family, it will remain poor forever. But the world is changing. The world is changing. And today, if you have a poor man, basically tomorrow, his next generation may go much beyond that. I'll just give you an illustration. I had a driver working with me for 12 years. He has got now 2 engineers, one of them sitting in USA, one of them in UK. Do you presume? Should we presume that he was a driver? He will always remain poor. So therefore, the poor man housing should not be outside the city, in the peripheral areas. They should be part of the city so that, they can develop the areas or the house or the residence as and when their situation improves. So social integration is a very important aspect, basically that. That's an argument which we normally give why housing policy should be part of the urban policies. It's very important that when you develop a housing policy, we should really see what kind of urbanization we are really going to have, and it's very important. Then of course the argument of urban resilience, climate change resilience, disaster preparedness management, another important feature for any smart city, energy sustainability, reduction of greenhouse gases emissions. In one sense, if you see the governmental policies which are really coming up with an emphasis on, solar-based energy systems, solar cities which we are trying to develop and have for the last 5-7 years, they are there. 64 solar cities, where as a matter of fact the emphasis is on solar. So they are the steps in the right direction. But I'm just trying to highlight and say when you talk of smart urban models, smartness of the city, it also depends upon how much city is using renewable sources of energy. Practical and enforceable norms and rules. And I think that's another important feature that we really talk about. This is basically a slide for a city with a city-wide strategy, urban transformations, planned city extensions, etc., etc. And if you see the benefits of smart city extensions, there are large number of economic, social, and environmental benefits that emerge out of that. This is the last slide, perhaps, I think. Facilitating smart urban planning. Again, I repeat, a three-legged approach that we are really highlighting, saying you have to have stringent rules and regulations, normative, and then the urban planning and design, and robust financial planning. This is very important. And if you have that, you can really work to fulfill your dream of smart cities. But I think there are missing gaps which we have to really see how we strengthen that. Thank you so much.